What you should know before getting your tongue pierced. Coming up next on Consultations by a Piercer, episode number 26. So stick around. For those that are new to the Body Piercing and Tattooing channel, first off, welcome to the channel. Hope you're enjoying the videos and finding them helpful. But you might not know who I am. My name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and I operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. Now, today we're going to talk about the fastest healing piercing there is, the tongue piercing. Usually this will take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks to heal, during which time I generally suggest rinsing a couple times a day, as in 2, with a alcohol-free mouthwash. I like Biotine antiseptic mouthwash mainly because it helps with dry mouth, which is a side effect of healing out a tongue piercing. So it helps a little bit. The other thing I suggest doing is rinsing 2 to 3 times a day for about anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes with a mixture of sea salt, 1/8 of a teaspoon per cup of distilled water. If it feels good to do it for a couple times, try a third time. It's more about kind of making you feel better and kind of taking some of the edge out of it and hopefully healing a little faster. Now let's talk about cross-contamination. Wash your hands before you handle it or stick them in your mouth. No oral contact, deep mouth kissing, or sexual contact of any kind for a minimum of 8 weeks. Do not stick unclean objects in your mouth. Pin caps, toothpicks, dirty fingers, other people's dirty fingers, and various different other items until it's completely healed. Keep your food utensils clean on a regular basis. Also, do not share food items or utensils with other people. It's a good idea to start out with a fresh toothbrush. It's not necessary, but it's a good idea, especially if you had an older one you've been using for a while, just to be on the safe side. Now let's talk about one of the things that's the biggest factor with healing out a tongue piercing, and that's trauma, swelling, and abuse. This piercing does swell. It affects you a lot more than other piercings that swell do. And there's some requirements that you're going to have to do to kind of make life easier. First thing is for that first 3 to 5 days or until the swelling goes down, soft foods and simple foods. And I'll go into some of those here a little bit later. You want to stay away from anything that's complicated or involves a lot of chewing or a lot of moving parts around your mouth. You want to eat slowly and carefully. Take your time. Plan ahead. If it takes a week or an hour to eat a bowl of apple sauce, it takes that long. Just be patient. Eventually, this will all get a lot easier, but at first, it's best to be cautious. Reduce talking if at all possible. This is a muscle. The more you move that muscle, the more you strain it, the more swelling you're going to see. Basically, if you have a job where you talk a lot, I usually suggest doing this on whatever your end of the week day is, like your Friday, so that you have those 2 days, 2.5 days or so before you have to go back to work, just to give your body time to kind of recover and that swelling to start reducing. But if you can get away with not talking at all for like 3 to 4 days, you're going to have a better experience. Now, you want to cut down your intake of hot and spicy foods or anything that may agitate the mouth. Think about what you've eaten in the past, and if it burned to eat it, don't eat it. Stay away from extremely warm coffee or drinks or foods. Everything should be room temperature or cooler until the swelling goes down. No tobacco products or vaping. Also, I do not suggest cannabis. I know a lot of people are going to post in the comments, but cannabis is an anti-inflammatory. Well, if you're ingesting said anti-inflammatory in a way that causes inflammation, it kind of cancels both of them out. Now, the other thing you want to stay away from is alcohol, as in alcoholic beverages like beers, wines, and especially hard liquor. Another thing you want to stay away from is carbonated beverages. Soda, beer, or, what we call in the Midwest, pop. Soda water, anything that's carbonated tends to agitate the piercing more, which leads to more swelling. Citrus drinks like orange juice and fruits that are made of citrus, citrus fruit, or anything that has that kind of acidic effect to it, We're talking oranges, lemons, limes, etc. Grapefruit. You should probably avoid it because they tend to agitate the piercing and lead to more swelling. And lastly, if it hurts to eat it, don't eat it. Now, as I've mentioned, I'm going to suggest that you are on a soft food diet for the first roughly 3 to 5 days. Foods you can eat are things like yogurt, smoothies, ice cream, nutritional shakes. Baby food is awesome. Applesauce, pretty much anything that you can eat through a straw. Though you're going to probably find straws uncomfortable. I know you're going to search on the internet and find a lot of people going, oh, you can't eat, don't do dairy. Dairy causes yeast infections in your mouth. Oh. That is an old urban myth. It does not. There's no factual base to that. In fact, yogurt, especially because it's a cultured bacteria that's in it, because of the cultured bacteria in it, will reduce the likelihood of thrush, which is a fungal infection caused by overcleaning, or you basically create a bacterial imbalance in your mouth. You get an outbreak of a fungi called thrush that normally lives in your mouth, but it takes over. So very brutal takeover, I guess. But yogurt, perfectly fine. Ice cream, perfectly fine. Dairy-based products, perfectly fine. Now, some things you can do to reduce swelling. Cold items are fantastic. Raid the freezer. Pull out those popsicles. Crushed ice or chipped ice is really good. Generally, when somebody leaves the studio, the first thing I tell them to do is go out and hit a convenience store and just buy a giant glass of chipped ice. Staying hydrated. Getting up throughout the night, having a couple glasses of water, especially the first couple nights, because you usually will see the worst of the swelling the day after or the morning after. Staying hydrated will help with the swelling greatly. Now, if you've never had issues with anti-inflammatories, or there's an anti-inflammatory that you have not had issues with, it may help. I, as a doctor and not a medical professional, cannot suggest that you take these things, but if you haven't had issues with it, shouldn't be a problem. It may help a little bit. The last thing is sleeping with your head elevated above your heart. This will help reduce the likelihood of seeing swelling the morning after. Now, let's talk about once that swelling goes down, you start to wean yourself onto solid foods. I really suggest sticking with simplistic foods, bland foods that you can cut up into small pieces, pick up with a fork, and shove directly back into your molars. You're going to have that longer barbell in there until you downsize, so moving around food with your tongue like you do naturally, or catching it in the corners of your cheeks and etc., is going to increase that likelihood of catching that barbell, especially since that longer piece is in there. So stick with kind of simplistic things. It's going to be very frustrating at first, and it's going to feel like this is never going to feel good. But I promise you, after a few days, it'll feel stranger to have that jewelry out than to have it in. Just get past that frustration and stick with it. Now let's talk about the risk of getting this piercing. There is always a risk of enamel erosion, gum erosion, and softening of the bones inside your mouth. No matter where it's placed, no matter how well you take care of it, no matter if you downsize to the perfect piece of jewelry, it is always a possibility. And when you start seeing signs of these problems happening, the only thing you can do is remove the jewelry and hope that you haven't caused too much damage, because it tends to be irreversible. The other big risk is swallowing parts of the jewelry. It's important to check the tightness of the balls on a regular basis. I've passed probably about 3 of them over the years. For some reason, they always fall off while you have a mouthful of food and don't know it until after you swallowed. And for me, it's always been Reuben sandwiches. I don't know what I do when I eat Reubens, but for some reason, it loosens up the jewelry. But they're not really the best thing to go through you. In most cases, it's not something you should panic about. It's a good idea to kind of monitor your bathroom activities for a while to make sure that it does pass. If it doesn't, go see a physician. Don't put that, if it does and you find it, don't put that back in your mouth. Now let's talk about pain in the piercing experience itself. Most people say this is on a scale of about 2 to 3. It's not a very painful piercing. I think partly because we compare tongue pain to biting down on it. And our teeth are very blunt. They're not really sharp. They're a lot larger than the amount of the size of a needle that we're going to put through there, which is usually a 14 gauge piercing needle. So it doesn't hurt as much as like biting your tongue. That hurts a heck of a lot more. It seems like the impact lasts longer. One of the things that's hardest about getting your tongue pierced is keeping your tongue outside your mouth. We're not really designed to have our tongue flapping around in the breeze. You're going to drool. That's just part of it. The saliva seems to build up and pool right there on that lower lip. Don't worry about it. We will probably prepare you for that with a dental bib and probably a drool rag or cup or something to catch it in. It's just part of the process. I have to say that it can kind of produce this panic-like feeling with some people because you don't have control of your tongue. It's probably one of the few occurrences in your life where someone else can control whether or not you can move your tongue, whether or not you can move it back in your mouth, and that can be a little odd and a little frightening to a degree. Afterwards, you're going to have a little bit of throbbing and aching. Eating will be uncomfortable. Anytime you move the jewelry, you're going to feel pain. And talking can be a little uncomfortable. So like I said, it's best to just have that day to just not do anything. If you're planning on going to some event, like, a chili cook-off that day, not the best day to do it. If you plan on doing some public speaking, not the best day to do it. Try to kind of pick a day where you can just relax after getting it done. And it does take a while to get used to adapting to the jewelry, and it feels very, very awkward, very uncomfortable, and very strange at first. Give it time. Eventually, it'll feel stranger to have it out and to have it in. Now, let's talk a little bit about anatomy. This is a piercing that you do need to have the anatomy to do it. The main thing is the location of where that tendon, the florineum tendon on the underside of your tongue, connects to the tongue itself. We do not want to pierce through that. Partly because you're just not going to have room for that bottom part of the jewelry to actually fit inside your mouth comfortably. It's usually done, the tongue kind of curves upward. It's done kind of perpendicular to that curvature so that it matches the naturalness of the tongue. It should not be done at a really steep angle. If it is, and it's to the point where you can feel pressure on your front gums, lower gums, you should probably take the piercing out and have it redone. But we will look at that, see if that tendon is too far forward, and a way to test that is stick your tongue out and try to touch your nose. While you're doing that, you'll notice that the tip of it kind of bends upward. Where it bends upward at is where that tendon's connected. And we need roughly anywhere from a half inch up to 3/4 of an inch to the tip to comfortably do the piercing safely. As I mentioned, the angle is usually the top ball is a little further back than the front ball if your tongue's perfectly flat and straight. It should be done in a way that is as far back as possible and away from your front teeth. This will make it harder to play with it, but it also will make it less likely to have contact with teeth and gums. Midline, right between those two muscles that your tongue is connected, dead center. Lastly, I'm going to talk about things you should consider and some hints. First thing is if you're going in to get this done, I really suggest that before you go in, kind of plan out the day, go have a nice meal at some place that you just adore or have your favorite meal at home, because you're not going to be able to eat foods you like unless you like soft foods. Then you're going to be fine. But there's going to be certain things in your diet that you really enjoy that you're not going to be able to do. So kind of have that last final meal, so to speak. Now, the effect that this piercing has on eating and talking can last up to a week and a half. It's not uncommon for people to have a lisp or kind of a speech impediment, or even people that maybe have overcome one to have it come back. It eventually does fade, but you should kind of figure that out in advance and stock up on food that you can eat ahead of time so you don't have to do any additional shopping the day of the piercing. Downsizing. Downsizing makes your life so much easier. It's very important to go back to your piercer and have them downsize. If you are in a situation where you can't make it back to your piercer, talk to them at the time of the piercing and ask them if you can purchase a guide pin, threaded, to change it yourself at home in the shorter barbell of what they're eventually going to suggest. Also, when you're downsizing the jewelry, you want to stay away from jewelry that has any sharp edges, points, extremely large ends, or anything that's decorative or has things hanging off of it. Think about this in advance. Do you have any upcoming dinners, events, or are you going on vacation? You're not going to be able to eat what you want for the next week at least. This is going to affect that, and it's going to affect speech, and it probably will affect your comfort level. So if you are planning on going on a trip, or maybe you're going to go to, maybe you have some activity where you need to speak at or what have you, it might be best to postpone getting the piercing done until afterwards. And lastly, this piercing is a lot about adaptation. And what I mean by adaptation is getting used to having that in your mouth. Once you downsize, it gets a lot easier, but there's still that level of learning how to eat, learning how to talk, and move things around in your mouth comfortably without catching that barbell. Be patient. It will take some time, but you'll get the hang of it, and it'll feel stranger, as I've said before, to have it out than to have it in. Well, that's it. That's all I have to say about tongue piercings today. I hope you found this informative. Till next time, here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see you for your body piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video.